Hello, welcome to Atheist Talk, produced by Minnesota Atheists. I'm your host, August Berkshire. During and at the end of this program, you'll see contact information about how you can get more information about Minnesota Atheists, including a free sample newsletter. In 2008, an organization called Marry Me Minnesota was created by 3 same-sex couples. The purpose of the organization was to challenge Minnesota's ban against same-sex marriage. On our program today, we're pleased to have 2 of those founders of Marry Me Minnesota, Doug Benson and Duane Gajewski. Welcome, Doug and Duane.
Thanks, August.
Yeah.
Nice to be here.
Yeah, well, thanks for coming. And well, let's start with a little background on the 2 of you. How long have you been together as a couple?
We've been together for over 21 years.
21 years.
Correct.
Okay. And you've been legally married a number of times, but all outside of Minnesota, unfortunately, because it's not legal in Minnesota. Tell us about this. It's fascinating, this marriage experiences that you've had.
It's been an adventure in itself. Yeah, in 2000, when the state of Vermont began performing civil union ceremonies, because their Supreme Court had decided that they had to provide an equivalent, to marriage, and instead of going full bore and having a full legal marriage, they went with civil unions. But that was the first thing that was available for same-sex couples within the United States to do.
This is before the Massachusetts ruling?
Oh yeah, this was in 2000. Massachusetts wasn't until 2004.
So Vermont said we're going to have civil unions.
Civil unions.
So you
they were the first state to have the civil unions.
Okay.
And it wasn't officially a marriage,
right.
So it was only legal within Vermont. And once you left Vermont, that contract was no longer good.
Yeah, because marriage laws are state laws, so
right.
They vary state by state. So you drove or flew out to
Yeah, we flew
Vermont.
out and got the civil union. We wanted the most official ceremony we could get, so we had it at the local courthouse by a, what do they call the judge?
It was a local judge.
Justice of the Peace, or
yeah, it was I don't know, some kind of a judge anyway. So we had it right in a courtroom, and, with our witnesses. And Duane and I had lived in Vermont for a couple of years during the 90s in pursuit of Duane's career, and so we had neighbors and friends from there, from Montpelier, and so that's where we got hitched. And my best man was an 80-year-old woman, our neighbor, and
my best man was also a woman.
Yeah.
Her name was Lynn Fish from where I was working at the time.
Yeah. Now
mine was Lillian Brewster.
Okay.
Yeah, she kind of served as our surrogate mom while we were out there.
Yeah, she was our next door neighbor in a
nice.
set of townhomes.
Okay.
Yeah.
So this was a Vermont civil union. Was it essentially the same as marriage or close to it?
Well, the problem with civil unions is that it's not the same. It has a different name, and the biggest problem with civil unions is, on a day basis, people don't really know what that is. They understand what married is, but they don't really understand what civil unions are. And even though it carries the same, legally carries the same weight, culturally it doesn't.
Yeah, because separate but equal is not equal.
Yeah.
And in fact, in 2004, the Massachusetts Supreme Court recognized this when it said, according to our state constitution in Massachusetts, you can't discriminate against gay people, and you have to offer marriage. And the state legislature came back and said, well, can we give them all the rights but call it something different? And the Massachusetts Supreme Court said, no. You can call it whatever you want, but you have to call it the same thing for straights and gays. So they said, okay, well, we'll call it marriage then for both. So that court really understood that separate is not equal. It's got to be the same for everybody.
Yeah, I like when people ask about, they kind of come up and, you know, if they're against marriage equality, they'll come up and kind of whine at you and go, do you have to call it marriage? And it's like you ask them back, well, why do you not want it to be called marriage? You know, what's the point? Well, obviously they want to be special.
Yeah.
You know,
they want to pervert.
Well, I mean, one solution would be to let religions keep the word marriage and call all ceremonies by the state civil unions, including straight ceremonies. Just, you know, because the Massachusetts Supreme Court said you can call it what you want, but it has to be the same for everybody.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
But of course, marriage has become such a secular word as well as a religious word that that just gets to be too awkward. And
Yeah. If everybody got the same piece of paper, and civil union, and then whatever you want to do after that, that's fine with me. I don't care. If they want to do away with the word marriage, that's fine.
Yeah.
But
and,
as long
and
as
in
we
fact,
get the
if
same thing.
the state wants to get out of the marriage business altogether,
Yeah.
and not marry anybody, well, that's at least equal treatment under the law.
Yeah.
Right. Right.
So,
Yeah, that's the thing I really have a problem with. They can't.
Well, another problem with using different terminology for different types of legal contracts, although they're claiming that it's the same, it's not going to be very long before legislators will start making laws that will specify one term versus another term, and then almost immediately you're going to have different treatment.
good point.
Yeah.
So in 2000, you go to Vermont, get a civil union. And by the way, I think since then, they've grandfathered all those civil unions into marriages. So now I think you're considered married in Vermont.
In Vermont.
So
That's
then,
yeah.
what was the next locale?
The next locale was San Francisco, when Mayor Gavin Newsom decided that he was going to start marrying people within San Francisco itself.
I'm sorry. The next was Canada.
Was it Canada?
Yeah.
Sorry,
We
the
get
next one
married
was
so
Canada.
many times, it's just hard to keep track.
Should have brought a list. Yeah.
Okay, you tell the Canada story then.
Okay. Well, I mean, the first place on the continent where we could get legally married, outright legally married, was in Ontario, the province of Ontario, and so it's not a bad drive going up the shore to Thunder Bay, and so
right,
we
North
made
Shore.
arrangements up there. I had trouble getting a justice of the peace. I can't say for sure that they just didn't want to do it, or if they really were busy for the next 2 years.
Well, this was like a week after it became legal.
Yeah, it was
in
like a week.
Ontario.
Yeah.
But we thought, how things go. We thought we better take advantage of this now while it's there. So, and then we knew it was going to be an artifact, basically, for us to bring home with us, like the Vermont Civil Union. We knew it wasn't going to, have force of law in Minnesota, but at least we would have that.
Yeah.
And those symbols are important with a couple, who are committed to each other for life. It's something that our culture, bestows on people that want to, make that commitment. And so we wanted that. And so then we headed up to Thunder Bay, and we were able to get a Unitarian lay minister, and that was as close as we could get to an official. They were very nice, and we had our ceremony in a park. It was Victoria Park?
I think it was Victoria Park.
Victoria Park.
Yeah.
And the Unitarians were great. They brought our witnesses. We didn't bring people with us because this was all done fairly quickly, and we wanted to get up there and do it. And so they provided our witnesses and a few other people and a photographer, and we cried like babies in the park doing our vows.
Is there a sense, you said you did it like within a week after it was legalized, was there a sense that, somehow this might get overturned soon?
Yeah.
Some right-wing politicians in Canada will flip it back, and so you want to get while the getting's good.
Yep.
Oh, absolutely.
And that certainly came into play in your next marriage in San Francisco.
Oh, yes.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, well, Mayor Gavin Newsom started marrying people in San Francisco. And once they were doing that, Doug and I decided that we would fly out to San Francisco and get married, and that was that event where you had a huge number of people that were lining up outside and around the county or the city courthouse, and they were spending all night there, just holding their place in line. We decided to do that, and we were, or Doug was trying to make arrangements for us to go out there, and he made the plane arrangements, and then when we got to the airport, we actually were late for our flight. So what they did was they started making arrangements for us to fly out on another flight, and then we went out to Chicago, and then to San Francisco. We got to San Francisco, it was about 1 a.m. In the morning.
Oh, wow.
We checked into a hotel and just took a nap for a couple of hours. And then at 3 a.m. we decided, well, let's go down to the county courthouse and get in line. It was pouring like the bejesus out there. So we went to a local Walgreens. We got a couple of shower curtains to protect us. And then I think, did we buy like a cheapy radio or something?
Radio,
yeah, we bought a little cheapy radio so we could hear what was going on. And then we got in line, and once we got there, we found that that there's well, so the courthouse occupies a full city block, and the front of the courthouse was right about here, and the line started coming down here, all the way down to the corner, down to the other corner, and then all the way to the back, and that's where we got in line at 3 a.m. in the morning.
So at 3 a.m. you're still 2.5 blocks from the entrance.
Right, right. And so you had this huge number of people there in line
Wow.
waiting to get married, and I mean, just that image itself is
I remember
a wonderful
those pictures.
display. Yeah, it's a wonderful display of people's commitment to
Yeah.
wanting to be married and having the recognition of having their lives together being recognized.
So although you had a civil union in Vermont, this was the first thing called marriage that you could get in the U.S.
Correct.
So still not legal in Minnesota.
Right.
Right.
But what happened to those? That got shut down at some point. The San Francisco, the mayor had an injunction against him by the court to say quit doing this or something.
Yes, he was marrying people for about 3 or 4 days before there was an injunction that ceased that. And then later on, there were some court challenges with regard to the legality of the marriages themselves, because Gavin Newsom was issuing these apparently without authorization.
Yeah, because he's a city mayor, and marriage is a state law.
Right.
So that would have been the issue.
I think he must have been pretty confident of the constitutionality of what he was doing, though, because, of course, later on in the court case in California, the Supreme Court upheld, the constitutionality of same-sex marriages. It didn't help the people who went out there during that window of opportunity over Valentine's Day. That was, it was in, the arrangements that we had made to go out there, just back up a little bit, were pretty hasty, and, we'd missed our flight to go to Chicago. And we found out in the course of rearranging our flights that I had neglected to book Duane from Chicago to San Francisco. So I had booked both of us to Chicago, but not Duane from San Francisco.
So he forgot to get my ticket from Chicago to San Francisco.
So how was the Greyhound ride?
Yeah, exactly. And so my comment was, well, who are you going to marry out there?
The ticket agent was really, really nice. She really accommodated us and made sure we were on the same flight and everything. But it was just so crazy and fun going out there and doing that. And then, we were married for a while. Then we went out and I think it was the Pride Parade out there in San Francisco that year where they had all the couples as the grand marshals.
Correct. Yeah.
So we went back out and did the Pride Parade.
Yeah, for the Gay Pride event the following June 30th or
Something
end
like
of
that.
June.
End of June, yeah.
Yeah.
So when the California Supreme Court ruled that same-sex marriages were legal, this was after the San Francisco thing. Did you go back out again to get married again in California? I'm kind of losing track of your marriage.
Yeah.
Sure.
No.
Okay. Do you know if those San Francisco marriages, well then were they grandfathered in under the Supreme Court decision?
No,
Those were declared to be void.
They were, okay.
Yes.
That's bad.
so it's just an artifact.
Okay.
You know,
Yeah.
that's,
Did you get married again somewhere else after the San Francisco?
That was the last
That
time,
was
but
it?
correct me if
Okay.
I'm wrong.
Okay.
no, we regard our Canadian marriage as the, you know,
Okay.
Yeah.
but
Now-
actually the Vermont one that's, you know, grandfathered.
It's a marriage now.
Yeah. So
But now Iowa, you had an interesting story about Iowa. Did you apply to get married in Iowa? Well, there was some story you had about.
yeah, I had understood or I had heard that you know, because of our marriage in Canada, that Iowa wouldn't marry us anyway because they recognize our Canadian marriage.
Right.
So
Iowa not only recognizes the same-sex marriage ceremonies that it performs in Iowa,
yeah.
it recognizes those from other states and other countries, just like
Oh,
any marriage.
yeah.
Marriage is marriage.
So I mean, since we're married in Canada,
Right.
we can go to Thunder Bay, you know, and we're regarded as a married couple. You know, we can begin driving south, drive across the border into Minnesota, where we're then regarded officially as complete strangers, and keep driving and go across the Iowa border, where we are once again married.
Oh,
And it's weird, you know, but
yeah.
you
So
know,
if ever we're
everyone's-
going to be in an accident, we have to make sure we're in the right state
Yeah.
in order to exercise our legal relationship.
Yeah.
But it is nice to drive down to Iowa once in a while, just to cross the border and go, we're married.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But we would rather have that here.
So, in 2008, you and two other couples formed Marry Me Minnesota, and the purpose was to legally challenge the discrimination that exists in Minnesota.
Right.
Right. And let me get this date. It's kind of a historic date, I think. March 6, 2009, the six of you, well, seven actually, with the lesbian
Sean.
couple's child.
Yeah.
March 6, 2009, you went to the Hennepin County registrar to get marriage licenses and you were denied. And that was the start of the whole series of court cases. So you were denied, and then you filed suit. You were denied, and you went to trial court. And this was interesting too, the whole jurisdiction thing. You were denied by Hennepin County, the Hennepin County registrar, so you sued Hennepin County.
Right.
Then, when you got into the trial court, Hennepin County says, well, what are you suing us for? We don't make the law. We're just enforcing the law, right? Why don't you go sue the state?
Yeah.
And the state's saying, well, we don't want any part of this. And I sort of got the sense, and I'm obviously farther outside the case than you are, but looking in, that they both kind of knew that this was a bad law that should be overturned, but they didn't want to take the responsibility for doing it, and they should have put it on the other person. It's a political hot potato, obviously.
Yeah.
I mean, less and less so as people get educated and less prejudiced, but
It's a hot potato if you're trying to defend it.
yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
As a matter of fact, during the course of the progression of your lawsuit, the Obama administration came out and said they would no longer defend the Federal Defense of Marriage Act because it's indefensible.
Right.
So that was something you ended up including in your court cases, that, hey, even the government, the federal government is saying, we can't defend this.
Right.
So,
And even an older case, Romer versus Evans, has been cited in the, overturning of the Prop 8 out in California by the Ninth Circuit, and also the Minnesota Court of Appeals used Romer versus Evans in their overturning of our dismissal as well.
yeah. So you file suit in trial court, and you lose there, and so you bring it then to the appeals court. There's 3 levels in Minnesota. There's the trial court, the appeals court, and then the Supreme Court, Minnesota Supreme
Correct.
Court. So, and all this, it's just amazing how much time all this takes. I mean, months go by. You file, and months go by before you get your hearing, your day in court, and then months go by until the decision comes out.
Yeah.
And then, so I mean, this has been going on since 2009, and it's 2012 now.
Yeah.
And it's still not over.
Well, we filed in May of 2010, but it's a long time. We're just about 2 years now.
Yeah. So you lost in trial court. You went to the appeals court, and this is where Minnesota Atheists stepped in. We were following the case because this to us is a prime example of state-church separation.
Right.
That the only reason you could deny equal protection under the law to same-sex couples would be for religious reasons, which does have no standing in a court of law.
Or shouldn't have.
Shouldn't, yeah. Unfortunately, they do. I mean, religions can do what they want in their marriage ceremonies. Catholics can decide we're not going to marry divorced people, and the Catholics can have that law for their religious ceremony. But the government can't discriminate against divorced people. So it's one distinction. I think Orthodox Jews won't do interfaith marriages, and that's fine for their religious ceremony. But the government can't discriminate on the basis of religion and say, we're not going to marry you because you're a Protestant and you're a Jew or whatever.
Yeah.
So there's the distinction. And so religions will always be free to discriminate against gay couples if they want to, but the state can't do that because that's not a secular reason. It's not a good. So we were watching this case, and you're not allowed to have friend of the court briefs at the trial level, but once it got to the appellate level, you are allowed to have a friend of the court brief, and this is where Minnesota Atheists stepped in. We were just kind of biding our time waiting. We were just champing at the bit to get at this thing. Because we had heard arguments out there that this was religious discrimination, that the government is favoring certain religious views, anti-gay religious views, and was discriminating against pro-gay religious views. And the Minnesota Atheist point of view was, government shouldn't even be looking at religion. What has religion got to do with this at all?
Well, it got us into this mess.
Yeah. So, that's when we stepped in and did our friend of the court brief. And we were the only group to do that. I was kind of expecting more groups. Maybe down the line, more groups will step in.
Yeah,
so,
we were really happy to get the amicus, obviously, and, the case hasn't even been tried on its merits yet. It's all kind of, staging for the big show, which now will come up. Now we will actually get to go to the district court and make our case and call the witnesses and make the arguments in favor of marriage equality, which we really weren't able to do.
Okay. Because what happened, it went to the appellate court, and they sided with your argument that this had not been tried on the proper merits, and, and they sent it back down to the trial court to do what you're talking about, to have a proper trial on the merits.
Yeah, it was like procedural.
So that was a win because you got what you had asked for, but again, it just drags it out longer. Do you have a date yet then?
No.
For the trial?
Apparently now it's that the date that we go is actually dependent on how quickly we get our paper in. So we're right now getting that finalized and ready to get filed.
Okay.
So yeah, there's no court-ordered timeline at this point until we move, and so we intend to do that at the earliest possible date.
Okay.
And at that point, then the clock begins to, tick.
Okay. And really, this is the way I see it is based on two constitutional principles. The first is separation of church and state, that we can't have these religious marriage laws shoved on everybody. If religious people want to abide by them and their religions, fine. But not to have it, enforced on everyone else. So separation of church and state. And then the 14th Amendment, equal protection under the law for all citizens. So those are kind of the two angles that I see on it, legally.
Yes, those are the basic arguments. And from our perspective, from the very beginning, all we've ever wanted and what same-sex couples want is that piece of paper from the state that they issue. Yeah. Once you get, I don't know if people realize that the big wedding and all the ceremony stuff really doesn't need to happen in order to be married. It's basically just having the signatures on that marriage certificate, and then you're married. And the ceremony is, you get married by a judge or a justice of the peace, or, a mayor, whoever might be empowered to do the ceremony. But the civil is different from the religious. The religious is not a civil proceeding. It is religious, and the civil proceeding is the government, the town clerk, issuing that marriage license, and that's all. That's what we want. That's something that everybody should be able to get.
Yeah.
And I think a lot of people confuse the idea of a wedding and a marriage. The wedding is the whole party, the event that takes place on one day where you just spend exorbitant amount of money. But the marriage is the thing that happens at the moment you sign that contract and live your lives together. The marriage is everything that happens after the wedding. And what we want to do is have the legal rights and obligations that all other married people have, so that we can visit each other in the hospital without having to ask permission of our government. We want to be able to have fair treatment in our taxes, and we want to have the recognition of our love for each other to be recognized.
Yeah, sounds reasonable to me. Well, we're out of time. Thank you for being our guest on the show today.
Well, thank you very much.
Very fast.
Thanks for having us.
Very interesting story. And thank you for tuning in to Atheist Talk, produced by Minnesota Atheists. Shortly, you'll see contact information on how you can get in touch with us. And if you'd like, you can get a free sample newsletter and a trifold pamphlet that talks about our organization. So if you're interested in us, we're interested in you.